Thank you all so much. Yeah, thank you all so much for having us here. We're really honored to be with you today, and I think we come to this with a lot of shared values around connection to the land and environment, and really wanting to build a community that centers those values. So we do have a presentation that mostly will be sharing the slides, but really just talking about some of the work that's going on. Mary is one of my favorite people in the world, and we work very closely together on many different community forums, and Triangle Native being one of those. So yeah, we'll just jump right in. I can share my screen. Please ignore my 7 billion tabs. I heard many executive directors in the room. Y'all know the life. Let's see, here we go. Okay. All right, can y'all see us here? Great. So we'll do just a little overview first. We will be sharing some stories and perspectives. Mary and I are both tribal citizens. We share one of those citizenships in the Lumbee tribe, and we will give you an overview just of our general Native community here in the Triangle and here in North Carolina. But if you're not familiar with Triangle Native American Society, we are actually celebrating our 40th anniversary as an organization, which is really phenomenal. For 39 of those years, it was all volunteer led. And then I came on as the first staff about a year and a half ago. Now we have a couple staff. We have an amazing board. Mary's our treasurer. Thank goodness for her. And I saw lots of friends and folks we're familiar with in the room. So glad to be with y'all, and glad to make some new friends too. I find that a lot of folks are not familiar with the Native community that we have here, so I'd like to start with some real basics. So North Carolina, we do have the highest Native population east of the Mississippi River. And here in the Triangle, we have the second highest population outside of Lumbee tribal homelands, which are down around Robeson County. We do have 8 state recognized tribes, and we're going to share the map in a minute. One of those being federally recognized. And we also have Tuscarora Nation, who is still fighting for recognition, state recognition. I'll say a word to that, which is that the recognition process is a very colonial process. That is not really how our communities define ourselves, but it does impact the resources that we have access to in the resource landscape. So being state or federally recognized or not recognized is not how we see each other. We see each other really as kinship communities and networks. Tribes are self-governing. We are sovereign. And you'll see lots of ways here where we speak to that. We also have 4 urban Indian organizations, Triangle Native being the one here locally. We cover Wake, Orange, Durham, Chatham, and Johnston counties, and have about 13,000 Native people here in the Triangle, which is really phenomenal. We just had our 40th anniversary gala, our Christmas party next week, and we have an event this week, the Native People Native Plant Symposium, that we'd love to invite y'all to, but we'll share a little more about that in a minute. Most Native people do actually live in urban areas, and so access to the land and environment is a big topic for all Native people, but especially for our urban population, where we may not even have that same access to our tribal homelands as our folks who live there. We are citizens of nations. Being Native American is not just a racial category, it is really a political designation. We are enrolled citizens of our tribal nations, and hold dual citizenship as kind of a way that you can think about it. So to introduce you to North Carolina and the tribes that we have here, of course, we have folks here who are from tribes all across the United States and elsewhere. But I like to try to get the names of the tribes here in North Carolina in people's mouths. I think it's really important to know your community, and if y'all are environmental advocates, then knowing the people whose land you're on is really important. And so as we walk around this map, I'd love if you can say back the name of the tribe as we visit them virtually. So starting with the green down here in Sampson and Harnett counties, we have the Coharie.
Harry.
Oh, Harry.
Over here in the red, this is who most folks are maybe familiar with. We have the Eastern Band of Cherokee.
Eastern Band of
Cherokee.
Cherokee.
Yeah. Up in the blue, up in Warren and Halifax County, we have the Halawa-Saponi.
Saponi.
And Halawa actually refers to Halifax and Warren County, because we do have three bands of Saponi who do have cultural connections, but Halawa-Saponi is up there. Down here in the beautiful turquoise, we have the Lumbee.
Lumbee.
Over here in the brown, out in eastern North Carolina, their headquarters are in Ahoskie. We have the Meherrin.
Meherrin.
Right here locally, hopefully y'all are familiar with your local folks. We have the Occaneechi Band of the Saponi Nation.
Occaneechi Band of the Saponi Nation.
I saw that Hillsborough just dedicated a bench to the Jeffries family. One of our elders, Miss Favette Jeffries, was honored in that, and it was in honor of her parents and John Blackfeather being their former tribal leader. But the Occaneechi Band are situated right here around Mebane. And then up here in Person County, also close by, we have the Saponi.
Saponi.
Their tribal lands extend up into Virginia too. And then down in the purple, we have Waccamaw-Siouan. We'll also shout out the Tuscarora, which do share lands with many of these, with headquarters also down around the Lumbee. And then in the yellow, we have our urban Indian organizations. One, Metrolina around Mecklenburg, Guilford Native around Greensboro, Triangle Native here in the Triangle area, and then Cumberland County Association for Indian People is down around Fayetteville. And we have a large military, veteran presence down there too. So yeah, that's a general map of the tribes. I will say I see a lot of folks wanting to do right and do land acknowledgements or whatnot and are searching online. There's like the nativeland.ca map. What I will say is that any map is just a timestamp, right? A timestamp in time. So this map does not show the extent of our true tribal territories. This is the political map of the recognized area of the tribes as it relates to the state. This is from the North Carolina Commission of Indian Affairs. And so this is the official, state map for how policies run down for our tribal nations. And then, of course, we have folks from tribes far and wide who are members of our community here. We do have a really close intertribal community. Folks tend to know each other from all the different tribes. Leadership works together. And we're very fortunate to have such a strong Native community here in North Carolina. A little note about language, because let's just get it out of the way. These are very commonly asked questions or areas where people have some hesitation. You will hear us interchangeably using lots of different terms to refer to ourselves. There are many ways to be right in how you refer to Native people. So some of this is also generational shift. You'll hear a lot of our elders really referring to American Indian. And that's where, that's what's written in policy. That's how we're documented in many official documents. And a lot of our elders talked about how they fought to have a checkbox basically on any sort of demographic form for American Indian. So that's how a lot of centers are written. You'll hear a lot of our younger generation really refer to themselves as Indigenous. And I would say Native American is probably the best like catch-all term generally for folks to use. You'll hear us just say Native quite often too. Really the best thing to do is refer to people as they refer to themselves, and truly best to refer to the specific tribal nation of the person that you're talking about or whoever you're talking with. A really big point, and this is something that I grew up with too. It's really important to not use past tense when referring to Native people. This is what we see in a lot of textbooks. This is what we see in a lot of articles. And it's a tool of language is a tool of colonization, right? And to so invisibilize us out of this modern world by using past tense is another one of those tools. And so whenever you read things and it's like, oh, Native American used, X plant for medicinal, or Native people were, all of that is incorrect. We are still here. We are still using these plants. We are still in relationship with our land. We are still practicing our culture. We're actually in this moment of really big cultural revival and resurgence, and really amazing things happening in Native community. So our communities are vibrant. We're very diverse. All of our tribes have different cultures, even when there are many things that we share with each other. And so it's just important to really know the people that we're talking about and that we're here present in kinship with each other. What makes us Indigenous is our tie to this land, and we will be Indigenous for many generations here into the future. Time immemorial, you'll hear a lot of Native people say. And I think I'll pass it off to Mary to share just a little bit about current issues that are important to community and general topics of interest as it relates to environmental topics y'all may be talking about.
Thanks, Jesalyn. Yeah, so we wanted to share issues and topics that are important to us, but also highlighting a lot of these things. There's probably a lot of like overlap and commonality with things that you all are interested in / engaging in. So these are very not some of these are specific to Indigenous communities, and some of them are just, broad sort of issues that we are facing as a collective in the world, in the United States. I'm not necessarily going to talk about all of these, but I think some that I'd like to highlight is just thinking about environmental and water quality issues. So thinking about the map that Jesalyn shared, a lot of our communities tend to traditionally be like farming communities, where a lot of animals and livestock are raised. And so environmental and water quality issues frequently come up in our home tribal communities, particularly as it relates to like hogs and chickens and things like that, and how we're supporting our communities and making sure that they have access to clean water, and avoiding environmental harms in that way. We have lots of folks in our community that are really interested in ethnobotany and thinking about, as Jesalyn mentioned, like kind of reawakening, reviving, increasing folks' knowledge around like how plants and medicines have been used in the past, and then contemporarily, how are we using them today, and how that's sort of like changing over time. What are we able to grow now compared to what folks have grown in the past, and thinking about climate change. Jesalyn and I are both very passionate about community foodways, and so we talk a lot about food and medicines, and thinking about traditional Indigenous foods and helping folks reconnect to those, and integrating those more into just our regular diets. One thing that's particularly come up a lot in the Triangle is thinking about economic development and how we're supporting people in connecting with traditional ways, but also making money, because the Triangle is expensive to live here, much more expensive than our home communities. And how are we using traditional ways, and whether that's arts and crafts, or like which for us, arts and crafts is very much so about like in the past, they were very much so about utility and creating things, and almost a form of like engineering, but thinking about how are we using our traditional knowledge and ways in supporting our families. And the last thing I'll highlight on here is land back. And that looks like lots of different things, but thinking about that in the context of the Triangle, as Jesalyn mentioned earlier, as a lot of us have may or may not have grown up in our home communities and are trying to go back or not, but how do we create space in the Triangle for folks to be able to access our traditional ways of being? And a lot of that is being on the land, being able to grow things, or having space for ceremony, or and having land that and space where we can do things together that are not necessarily open to the public, because there are definitely some, we do host powwows and other things in the Triangle that the public is more than welcome to come to, but there are definitely some things that you know, as far as ceremony and other practices that the public isn't invited to. And so how do we get space to be able to host different things together in a space that, you know, most of the land is privatized, and we don't necessarily always have, you know, a lot of our folks live in apartment buildings, and so, or homes that are like right beside each other. So thinking about space and land access is really important. Jesalyn, do you have other things that you wanted to highlight on here before we go on?
Yeah, I think you really covered it. We can go into a little more in the next slides too. What I will say is that we don't see these as any single individual issue. All of these are very interconnected, you know, even down to preserving native languages is also a way of preserving our tie to the land, right? So there's no single issue. So often our society likes to act like these things are silos, but to us, they're all one and the same.
And so I wanted to, well, I'll talk about the things on the slide, but there's also like sort of kind of building off of the things from the slide. So we want to just share a little bit about sort of like the why of, you know, the work that we're doing around the environment and foodways and community wellness and all the things related to land. And, you know, we, as Native people, we see ourselves very much so in relationship with each other, but also with the rest of nature. As Jesalyn was just talking about how interconnected everything is, and we are relatives to each other. We don't see, you know, humans as the top of the food chain, so to speak, or sort of this dominant entity. But we are actually the little sibling. The plants and you know, trees and animals have been here and are much wiser than us. And so we're the little brothers and sisters. And so thinking about how do we be in relationship with them and practice reciprocity, and that, you know, as we are supporting nature and nurturing Mother Earth, like she's constantly giving back to us. And so I think I guess present day, our society has a lot of extractive practices, but we think less about how we're giving back. And I would say that that's something that's really core at Native Values is how are we practicing gratitude? How are we giving back? How are we living in balance with nature? And so a huge part of why we're doing the work that we're doing is how do we continue to build our relationship with the rest of nature? How do we reconnect with our relatives, our non-human relatives, and not just know their names, but like really understand and be able to observe, watch them, care for them, be in that like real relationship, so that, you know, then we're able to support Mother Earth and be in a better relationship with her. But it's also, we have a lot of health disparities. And so particularly thinking about food, then we have, you know, foods and medicines that are nourishing our bodies, that are helping us restore our own health and well-being. And yeah, there's just a lot of, I guess, just a lot of, I guess mutualism is also listed on here, but also just a lot of like that connection between us and nature and how we're supporting it or them and ourselves. I will say that a lot of this does connect to, you know, a deep respect for elders and youth and thinking about the 7 generations. We are constantly like learning from our elders and trying to continue the knowledge and the traditions that they've taught us. And so a lot of what we're carrying on isn't necessarily written down. And so part of that is being in those relationships, being able to continue those stories and be able to share that with the next generation, with the youth that are coming up now. So it's, I feel like Jesalyn and I are kind of like in this like middle space of like, holding on to our elders, and I feel like I very much so have, like, as I've gotten older, taken on this a huge sense of responsibility to be able to hold those stories, so that then I can then share them with the next generation. Yeah, I feel like I touched on a lot of these things. I guess the other things, just the 4 R's, I talked about 2 of them, but I think responsibility is a huge part. We've been given a lot. There's a lot of responsibility to care for and to be in right relationship with. And then, speaking of redistribution, or at least we don't value hoarding things. That wasn't a good way to be in community, and to make sure that the whole community is taken care of. So we are frequently, I think in most Native communities, wealth is about how much you can actually give away, not how much you have to keep for yourself. And so I know Jesalyn and I are always buying things just so that we can give them away to other people when the time comes, or just thinking about how we can, like, I'm like making some preserves, and I'm always like setting some aside to like give to someone else, or so just thinking about how can we share with others out of our abundance.
Definitely. And I think it's, the reason why we're sharing all this too is that when you're working with Native people and Native communities, all of this is so embedded into how we do what we do, which is very different than how a lot of our dominant society operates. And so there's things that can be really surprising to people who, when they enter into partnerships with Native people or Native organizations, we tend to move. Maybe the perception from the outside is that we move more slowly about certain things. And for us, that really comes to kind of these filters of values and relationship, and really moving at the speed of relationship, at things being at the right time. So much of our dominant society is deciding and kind of forcing things into being. And in Native community, we do a lot of bringing things back to each other and coming to mutual consensus before we move forward. So I think it's really important, if you're working at all with our communities, to understand the value set that we're coming from. And so to get into the work a little bit more, and some of you in this room will be familiar with some of this work because you've been there, but some just recent programs around this happening. And we do welcome partnerships and relationships. Again, sometimes that takes a little more time of putting those together because of the values that we work out of. But I'd like to shout out EB for hosting us out at Pandoland for an amazing field trip out to their Chickasaw plum stands. This came out of conversations, like Mary was saying, for so many of us up here, where are we actually able to access the land and our plant relatives, where they're living naturally. And so for years in community, we've really heard conversations around being connected, wanting to be more connected to certain culturally significant species. And when we found out that Pandoland had these incredible stands of Chickasaw plums, we had to go take a field trip out there. And so EB very generously hosted us and taught us lots around the Chickasaw plums. We had a bunch of community members come out there, divided up some of the plums to give giveaways, and also helped to assist with a tree seedling giveaway. We've done lots of plant giveaways, and we'll continue to do that. Even this week with the Native People, Native Plant Symposium, giveaways are a big part of Native culture. Gifting, like Mary was saying, kind of this culture of abundance and generosity, and giving is really big. And so all of these are culturally significant species. We also went down to a longleaf pine farm to really learn about restoration efforts and intentional replantings of longleaf pines and our native palms, which to us, it's a keystone species. It's a really significant species. It used to be the dominant landscape here, but also for us, it's so culturally tied. So many of our significant animals, birds that hold deep cultural significance are woodpeckers. All of this depend on that longleaf pine ecosystem, and so many of our cultural ways depend on this. Pine is a medicinal plant. And we use the needles in so many ways. We use the needles to make basketry too. You'll see longleaf pine needles on people's regalia when they go to powwows. So that was a really phenomenal. A farm visit doesn't capture really the breadth of what people were able to take away in that relationship building with the longleaf pines. You'll see a picture of elderberry down here. The Coharie tribe down in Clinton, they're about an hour south of here, has big traditions around elderberry that have come out over the last couple of years. So we went down and harvested elderberries on the land with them. All of these are places where we've been invited in partnership and relationship. That was so beautiful. We gathered almost 30, I think it was 29 gallons of elderberries, and then we're able to host a medicine making workshop for folks in community. And made elderberry syrup, and we're able to gift that out to folks in community. And that was really powerful. We've done that kind of informally over the years, but this year we really did a big to-do around the elderberries, and that was really phenomenal. Are the Native Plant Symposium, this is the second time we're doing this. It's in partnership with the North Carolina Botanical Garden, who we work very closely with. The UNC American Indian Center, Duke Gardens, and I think New Hope has been involved in that too. So lots of friends. The in-person has reached capacity, huge interest around any of our plant-based and environmental-based programs. So there's already been 120 registered in person, but we do have unlimited virtual capacity. This is on Wednesday, and I can drop the link in the chat because we would love y'all to join us on Zoom. We have tribal leaders, community leaders from all across. I think we have 5 or 6 different tribes represented who are coming to speak on different topics, and river cane restoration, maintaining muscadine vines, all sorts of different, a panel on conservation partnerships, all sorts of different topics. And then we're actually hosting a seed swap and a plant giveaway there too, but we would love to have y'all join us virtually. We just got back from the first gathering of a Women's Cultural Burn Association, focused on what in Western context is referred to as prescribed fire. We know we need fire in our ecosystem management that comes from Indigenous practices. So for us, it's a cultural relationship with fire and with the land. So it's a cultural burn, not a prescribed burn. A lot different approach. It was really interesting to see that. So probably 50 Native women gathered. I think the youngest was 6 and the oldest was in her 80s. And really phenomenal to be together on the land. We are a matriarchal people for the most part around here. So we really lean to our women and our matriarchs, our elders, especially for leadership, especially in maintaining that connection with Mother Earth too. And upcoming, we have lots of other programming planned around this. I will say that any of our environmental programming, and this is only one slice of what we do, but anytime that we have any type of environmental offering or program, people are, coming out of the woodwork to come to those. So we're really trying to respond to that interest in community. And Mary, I don't know if you have any thoughts to share about any of these.
Just that, yeah, I've been to participated in and helped with several of these events, and it's I also have 3 Chickasaw plums and 2 persimmons growing in my backyard now because of this. And so yeah, it's just been really meaningful to continue those relationships with our plant relatives, like I mentioned before, and just getting to figure out what they like, what they don't like, just getting to know them. And so and yeah, I feel like the elderberry harvesting was it was so hot that day, y'all, but and it's like, there's always like good stories that come out of things, and just the number of people that were there and getting stuck in the dirt and with our vehicle, or just, like I feel like we're making medicine, but it's also like just being in relationship with people and being with community is medicine. So yeah.
Truly. And we share those as examples too, because, many of you are in organizations that may steward land or have some of these culturally significant species that you are also supporting or in relationship with. And so we'd love to find ways to build partnerships around that can help create access for Native people too. I'll have, so food sovereignty, this is a little more specific, and I know we're getting close on time. I do want to leave some time for discussion, but this is really important to both me and Mary and many folks in our community. You'll see pictures here from multiple tribal communities around some of our culturally significant foodways. But I'll let Mary speak to food sovereignty here for just a minute and some of the work that she's been starting.
Yeah, and I can be really quick, but yeah, just we are very much so trying to cultivate more of our traditional indigenous foods in the area. So I've been being able to get native corn seed and bean seeds and growing those and being able to save seed and share them with other folks. Part of it is just, really, again, trying to heal ourselves and heal our community and our relationship with the earth. And so reconnecting with our traditional indigenous foods has been really important, particularly thinking about, foods that are best for us to digest, best for us to for this ecosystem, that are going to more easily grow here, that are good for the environment, the wildlife here. And so, yeah, we have folks that have been really integrating indigenous foods in all kinds of ways. We do have a Lumbee bakery who incorporates pawpaws into her macaroons. We've one of our other colleagues, she started a indigenous food business, and so she's going to be incorporating lots of indigenous foods, and she's doing catering right now, but they're working on setting up a food truck. So we are really just I know that there's a lot of movement in other areas of the country around like reviving indigenous food systems and foodways and medicines. And so we have just been doing our own work in this area. And our community, our home communities generally have continued to grow a lot of these things, but kind of bringing them into the triangle to like revive it with our triangle community has been really important. I'll just make it quick, Jesalyn, in case, did you have other things you wanted to add?
Just that I know, food is one thing that truly connects us all. And so I think this is a really easy entry point for a lot of folks to find partnership and common ground. And also, so much of the world food systems and world foodways these days use these ingredients that are indigenous to here in nature. And I think that's something that is under-recognized. So the influence of indigenous foodways is felt worldwide.
I'll just add one quick thing too, Jesalyn, is that so with rooted reciprocity, one of the things that sort of I'm envisioning, and with Jesalyn and other folks, is thinking about how do we use our foodways to help us create more community and grow collectively, but also thinking about how that connects to mental health and well-being and creating safe spaces for folks. Again, like thinking about access to land, but just thinking about how our language and our foodways are connected. Our foodways are connected to our values and our culture and our stories. And so bringing, and reawakening a lot of our foodways is really helpful in thinking about our traditional values and just reconnecting with traditional ways of being.
Definitely. So we'll move into some of the strategies. People are always asking, what can we do? How can we leverage the work that we're doing to be in partnership with Native community, be beneficial? So there are many, many ways. And I think, no matter where you sit in community, there are ways that you can help be a part of creating access. A lot of that is, a lot of it starts with just basic education. You know, obviously we are not taught the true history of Native people or the current state of Native people. And so I do think that being an ally and an accomplice in community can start with that type of peer education, finding correct information, which can be hard to do sometimes, right? And so that's why we wanted to share the map and the names of the tribes and ways that you can point or ways that you can cut into these institutions that really connect you truly to community rather than, you know, maybe a one-off with somebody individually that you meet. Thinking about any of you who are stewarding land or what in the Western world is referred to as natural resources, you know, to us it's kin, it's not a resource to be exploited. But if you're stewarding land, plants, water, you know, how can we think about actually writing into policy access or land use agreements that help make that accessible to Native people? And it may be, you know, I think anytime when we're talking about land, we have to be talking about Native people, and that there should be specific interventions or specific allowances, because Native people are different than any other group of people when we're talking about the land, because we are the land. We are tied to the land. Our identity, our culture is tied to the land. So making space for that and even codifying access or agreements to create that access could be really powerful. I'm going to move, our next slide speaks to a little bit to this too, but just really thinking about how can we direct resources, money, power, decision-making into Native hands, something really powerful that we can do. So here's some ways that you can support, you know, being that advocate, going beyond the land acknowledgement. I will say, you know, I cannot even tell you how many like infinite requests for us to come and do a land acknowledgement for an organization that we've never heard of before. And I'm not convinced that that actually moves the needle of any impact. I do think it's a good practice to know whose land you're on and to honor that. And I think we need to move beyond the land acknowledgement to how do we actually shift resources and shift power, you know, back into Native communities. So thinking about how we can move beyond the land acknowledgement and into that type of access and really resourced partnership. Relationship is a word that we take very seriously, and something that comes through reciprocity. It doesn't come through an email. You know, one email does not build relationship. And so how can we build authentic relationships with Native communities? I think y'all inviting us here today is a great example of that, you know, for us to be able to come and talk and meet each other. And I would like to move us into some conversation time. But how can we think about supporting capacity building and resource sharing with Native people to move it into something that's truly substantive, you know, beyond just the words of recognition? Mary, any final thoughts? And if not, we can move into, I'm sure folks have questions or comments to share.
No, I think we can move into questions or comments.
Great, thank you so much. Go ahead with questions. Also wanted to just say for folks who have anything that they want to, well, let's just go ahead with the questions. Any questions?
Hi, this is Maggie Bailey with We Plan It Forward. Jesalyn, we've communicated on email a few times, and just kind of thinking about how ways that We Plan It Forward could partner. And one of the things that we've been doing is seed collection, and we give some of those seeds to Pando and another nursery. But perhaps we could partner with you all to do some seed collection together, and you guys actually take some of those seeds yourselves. So that's just one thing, and then I think you guys have been involved in sort of more land acknowledgement and opening ceremony type of thing with the Earth Day Arbor Day Festival in Raleigh. And I would like to do some more educational type of I call them demonstrations. That might not be the right term to use here, but ways to educate people about our relationship with the land, indigenous people's relationship, but also just everybody's. I mean, I think we're just so disconnected with understanding the value of our relationship with the land and the natural environment. And I'd love to explore, doing some educational stuff at that Earth Day Arbor Day Festival. That's all. But I'll follow up.
Yeah, thank you. We appreciate it. And yeah, would love to do some seed saving, especially.
Yeah.
So I guess, I mean, thank you for the detail about how folks can support what you're doing, but because that's one of the things we always ask, at these presentations. Is there anything specific that you're working on now that we can support just through our email list, or that folks here could take back to their organizations that you'd like to mention? And while I'm talking about that, just to encourage you to use the email list, you're welcome to, actually, we can add you to the group if you'd like to do that. I don't think we've done that yet, so we can add you both.
Yeah, that'd be great. And yeah, I'll share a couple of things. We would love to have you come virtually to the Native People Native Plant Symposium. I think that's a great way to meet folks in our community and really see some of the work that's happening out on the ground that you may be able to connect to. I will say that we are always navigating our own capacity and being a really small organization with a really large community to be responsible for and a lot of different fronts that we're working on. We are always stretched thin, to be honest. And so we get an uncountable number of requests for presentations, coming out and educating or doing land acknowledgements. And those are wonderful ways to teach people, but we could spend all of our people's entire everyday doing those. And that also takes us away from being able to provide resources directly in our community. So we're always navigating that. And so I would also just encourage patience of trying to get on our calendar, honestly. But there are those partnership opportunities that really shine through of like, this is like measurably, has benefit to Native people. And so we're always kind of prioritizing what asks are coming through and what we're actually able to meet in a way that truly supports our people. And there are ways that we can share information that you can be that voice of advocacy, even in the areas where you have domain. So I think that's one thing to say. Another I forgot to mention was there's a great book that came out this year. Yeah, EB says donations would be a great ask. Absolutely. And we're working on building our capacity. We would love to be in a world where we could respond to every request and be able to be out there, but we need to build our own capacity to have that. Mary and I were talking about just before we signed on to hear about just the real invention that y'all could help us with is more hours in the day, but I don't know that any of us have a solution for that. But donations definitely help us to be able to expand our capacity to get out there and make things happen. A local guy, Duke professor, Lumbee tribal citizen, wrote an amazing book that came out earlier this year. It's called On the Swamp, Fighting for Indigenous Environmental Justice. This is really focused around North Carolina-based stories. He is a hydrologist, and kind of comes from that hard science, water quality background. Very trusted in community. This book goes through some of that science, but also community stories, oral histories, some of that justice perspective on a big scale. So we did have a book event, book signing with him recently, and we'll probably do another one in the spring that can be virtual because there was so much interest. But I definitely recommend grabbing a copy of this makes a great gift. And he's another local voice here in Durham that would be great to connect with. So I wanted to make sure to speak to that.
Okay, great, thank you. I'll go ahead and add you both to the Google group. Feel free to use that email list to, let people know if there's something that you're looking for support on. That would be an appropriate way to use it.
Definitely.
And,
I'll also say upcoming, we're kind of here at the end of the year, so we're already really looking into 2025. In October, the Dix Park Powwow, which is in Raleigh, will be coming back. We're heavily involved in organizing that. Powwows are meant to be a place of cultural exchange, the public to come out, really learn about community, meet community. There is powwow etiquette, that you can just Google and really learn about before you go. To be able to really understand what you're experiencing and what you're walking into. But powwows are great, family friendly. Babies love powwows. Good food, dancing, music, celebration. So I would really encourage you to go out. There's a powwow almost every weekend in North Carolina. So you could catch them through the year, but here locally, actually the North Carolina School of Science and Math hosts the kickoff powwow every year in February. Central has a powwow, Duke has a powwow, UNC, State, all the colleges, all the tribes host their own powwows. And then there's ones like Dick's, in the urban areas. So I definitely recommend you go out to that. The North Carolina Indigenous Artists Festival is also happening every year at the North Carolina Museum of Art in the spring. So look out for that. That's a great free public event to go out to and meet people. And a lot of our art also connects with our environmental ties, just culturally based on who we are. Even down to our earrings. I can't see Mary's details. These are little strawberries honoring our first berry that comes forth every year. So there's, like we're saying, none of these are single issues. They all connect together. So we do welcome you out to community events, and there's lots of ways to learn more about Native folks and get involved. I'll also say November is Native Heritage Month. We get absolutely slammed with requests in November, and typically our folks already have their calendar for November set as of like January. So a lot of people reach out, in late October or early November wanting to partner, and we're already fully booked up and have like 500 emails sitting in the inbox. So I would recommend that you reach out outside of November and outside of those times, and just keep that in mind when you're interacting with community.
Okay, we're about out of time. Thank you. Thank you both for being here and really valuable information. We appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
Anybody really quickly has something burning they want to announce? Also encourage people to put it in the chat. Anything that anybody wants to bring up before we end the meeting? And again, feel free to send stuff on through the email list. If there's stuff that you want to let people know about.
Can I make an announcement?
Absolutely.
Can I first say thank you to Jesalyn and Mary for a really wonderful and informative presentation. I really enjoyed listening to y'all talk about this. So thank you for that. But circling back, I'm a master's student at Duke, and I'm conducting a master's project, and we are doing a landscape and network analysis of different organizations that are based in the Triangle, specifically those that are focused on the environment or DEI initiatives. So we're doing a survey, and we would love your input if you haven't already filled out the first survey that we sent out in the beginning of November, I think. But anyways, for those who complete the survey, you'll be entered to win one of two $50 Amazon gift cards. So thank you in advance for the help, and I hope everyone has happy holidays.
Thanks. You want to go ahead and send that out on the email list? Okay. Great. Okay, lots of thank yous, and this will be for the presentation. This will be on our website posted. So, okay. Thanks everybody, and have a great day. Enjoy the rain.